and trying to adopt them. So I'll talk about kind of the layered defensive depth approach to zero trust, and I only get 20 minutes. So it's going to be a service level approach to the discussion of those approaches. But then it's not end all be all, and that's kind of where our unique niche in the Defense Department and IC is we secure the network boundary between trusted and untrusted networks. So bear with me. I'll take you through kind of quickly through the zero trust pillars, and then we'll talk about what OWL does to augment that. It's not a good. What is this doing? Same here for one. I'm going to do it this way. There we go. Okay. So there's 4 pillars, or 5, or 6, or 7, or 8, depends on whose paper on zero trust you read. So I'm going to go with the GSA, the acquisition strategies for DoD and IC. So they put out what they consider their pillars of zero trust. So we'll walk through those. So we'll start with the user. Non-repudiation is the term that's used. So are you who you say you are? And the way that the Department of Defense and IC do that is something you are and something you know, or something that you have. So multi-factor authentication, a certificate, biometrics, and a password. So we start with that root of trust of the person. And then we get to the device. There's a lot of work on secure boot, UEFI, securing that, establishing the root of trust on the device. There's a trusted platform module that measures the bootloader, that measures the operating system, and if all of those haven't changed, then it allows it to actually boot. Then once you're booted, there's a whitelist of applications. They talk a little bit today about the supply chain for source code. So in the defense and the IC departments, if there's a critical component that's in open source, you can't just pull that code compiled off the open source community website. You've got to bring it inside your secure development environment, do static source code analysis, maybe harden a few things, and submit your scans before you can field it onto the network. It's not just whitelisting applications, it's these whitelisted applications have had to come through a trusted supply chain. There have been a number of exploits out there where actors have injected exploits into open source repositories, and people downloaded the link the night we build, and then now they've just inherited something that's broadcasting data to another country. Another thing that the Defense Department does is it's a public standard, commercial systems for classifying. So if you want to take a product stack and establish a remote teleworking capability that can go up to US secret or higher, there's a product stack, and you can read about that. It's a double VPN tunnel. They use diversity. And so what they say is, I'll use Cisco and Jupiter, and if there's an exploit in the Cisco tunnel, the Jupiter tunnel will be there. So 2 VPN tunnels. So I have a user certificate, a device certificate. I've got my certificates for my VPN tunnel. So now I'm up to 3 certificates. Those certificates are typically password protected. So I haven't even gotten to anything to actually use my device. I've had to log into my device. I've had to enter my user certificate. I've had to enter my device certificate password and my 2 VPN passwords. 5 passwords, and I can't even do anything. Okay, now, once you get connected into the network, all of the services that you interact with in zero trust, you trust no one, right? So every server-to-server connection has a mutual TLS authenticated connection, maybe an IPsec connection. So a couple of certificates there. The interesting thing about certificates is they have an expiration date. So I could have, just to get to my web portal, 7 certificates that I might have to navigate, all from different issue dates. So if one of those certificates expires, I can't get to my email. Which one first? So now you've got an end user teleworking, calling the help desk saying email's not working. And it could be any of those certificates along the way expired. So from a support standpoint, it's very secure, but it's very hard to support. Other things that I've seen happen in defense networks with our systems that are out there is IT will migrate to a new domain controller that is a certificate distribution point. And then all of the certs now can't authenticate. And if they can't reach the certificate revocation list after a certain time, they don't trust the connections anymore. And so it is monitoring, tracking those assets, knowing when those certificates expire. If you've got 5 nines of reliability requirements, you'll have a very secure network. It's going to be very difficult to maintain those 5 nines. So the infrastructure inside your enterprise network, whether it's in the cloud or not, you're going to have some network segmentation that we talked about today. DoD takes a little bit further. They don't trust VLANs. There are, as we exploit called VLAN hopping. So even if you've got your switch separated with VLANs, I can hop traffic from one VLAN to the other. And if you think you've got your database and your application server isolated because they're on different VLANs, they're not. So how do we keep our management network isolated from our application network? In DoD, it's a physically separate switch. If you want to, if you're going after a cloud service provider and you want to get a exploitation that gets you the money that you're seeking the fastest way, attack a hypervisor. If I can do a malware injection at the hypervisor, I just encrypted all of those companies' assets, and now I can exploit them all at once. And then the applications, rootless containers, Kubernetes is fantastic. It has great access to your network. So if I want to exploit your network, I can take over your Kubernetes server. Now I have access to every machine at root. So I own your whole network. So DoD says you can't do that. No Kubernetes, rootless containers, no root orchestration. So with the administrative overhead and the container environment, you get that isolation of your processes inside the container, but administering all of those containers is a little bit more difficult since you can't sit across the entire enterprise in one root level service and control all those containers across your cloud infrastructure. Mutual TLS connections between the servers for the applications that are running or certs, and SAML is a secure web services technology. And then the other thing they do is at the data level, they'll use XML firewalls. So if you've got web services running, you'll write XML schemas, and you'll only allow the messages for the API calls and the types of data that you know that you're going to allow to exchange. And then they put security markings on them as well. So all of their records have to be at the paragraph level, marked at that classification level. So you can have a document that has maybe the name of the document is unclassified, but a couple of paragraphs inside of there are classified. And depending on who you're sharing that document with, some people might be able to see the entire document, but others might only see 2 paragraphs out of 10. And then analytics, collecting all of the logs. They collect lots of logs in DoD and IC. When you log in, when you log out, when machines boot. Some networks, they connect whenever an IP connection, TCP connection is made and disconnected. Logs and logs and logs. They have so many logs now that they actually have AI/ML initiatives to train the AI to look at the logs because they have so many logs they can't even mine it. It's just so many logs. It's trivia. It's knowledge they can't act. And then your internal workers, right? So this might be an external customer. The best way to reduce your operating costs is to push as much work as you can out to your customers. So for instance, if you're an insurance company, you don't want to receive and process medical claims. You just give them that up on the phone. They can take pictures of the receipts and upload them to you. If that end device is compromised, there are lots of bad things that can happen inside of Word documents, especially PDFs. So, you know, even your end user workstations that in the DoD and the IC, they lock those down, and they actually take glue guns and they glue the USB port shut, so you can't plug your phone in there and charge it. And I'll talk about that. And then visualization analytics. Orchestration and automation, there's a little talk about that. So you have all these logs, you're analyzing these logs, you notice the servers get report scanned. Most data centers in the DoD have thousands of square feet of racks, and they have 4 people on rotation to manage. So something's always on fire, and they're putting out the brightest and hottest fire and ignoring the rest. So there's a big push to automate as much of that response as possible. Maybe the AI/ML sees that port scan, goes out to that end device that's acting poorly and turns that port on the switch off, and just completely disconnects that device from that. So the kind of the real threat that and this is a part that isn't really, I think, understood well, is inside the cell phone is what's called a baseband controller. That takes the energy waves of the radio and converts that through the Mac into the zeros and ones that are received on your phone. That is a small RISC processor that has firmware that is on most cell phones on the same die as the cell phone processor. And so there's been published exploits on iPhones and other phones where from microcell, where you can go in and microcells are popping up all over the place. They pretend to be your cell phone's carrier. You get your phone out, you try to use your phone. They can actually, through the cell radio, through the baseband controller, exploit that firmware and inject applications onto your phone. So if you go to China, bring a burner phone and leave it there. So the BYOD, bring your own device, teleworking, COVID, the world's changed, everybody's working remotely. And now you have this real uncontrolled exploit. I guess it should. So what does the DoD do? Now that the DoD knows that the cell phones can be exploited, what are they doing about it? So there's a company called Redwall. They make a phone image that you can boot into a personal image or your government image. The government image actually won't even power up the cell radio. And so how do they use it as a cell phone? They either use a Bluetooth hotspot or a Wi-Fi hotspot and talk VoIP over it. And then they switch back to the reboot the phone into the unclassified image, and then you can call your wife and talk to her about the kids. So that's how far the Defense Department IC has done that. Okay, so as a commercial vendor trying to build a commodity app, something people actually want to use, you're not going to be able to say, here's your phone, here's your 7 certificates. There's all these draconian things that you're going to have to do to actually use that. So you're going to be able to give them a certificate potentially, or a password, or some biometrics. You're not going to get secure boot. You're not going to get whitelist applications. Sorry, you can't use Facebook. Sorry, you can't use Instagram. Nobody's going to want to use your application if you force that. You're not going to have a device certificate if they bring their own device. You might have one there. If you're looking at double VPN tunnels and all of that, you're not going to be able to do any of that. So you might be able to do application level TLS and multi-factor authentication. So zero trust for real comprehensive zero trust, where you could say that you could mitigate the risk all the way from the end instrument for the most part, all the way into the enterprise is not going to actually work unless you control the end device. So the rule that the government has adopted is that if there's a computer that's directly or indirectly connected to the internet, that isn't isolated, whether it's through VPN, that is considered unlimited risk. There's no way around it. You cannot connect that. If you have a trusted government network, it cannot connect to the enterprise or any of those services without going through what's called a cross-domain device. And so there's this is an example of the markings on the document. So the title of the document is classified, so I can put it up here. There's a binding operational directive that was put out by NSA that says that zero trust is no substitute for cross-domain solutions. The rest of it's classified, can't talk about it, but basically saying zero trust is very good, but it doesn't protect the enterprise from the end instruments that are out there, whether it's a laptop or a phone. So what a CDS does, a cross-domain server that is out there, a cross-domain system, is it sanitizes the application level data. So all encryption has to terminate before it reaches the CDS, or it essentially terminates at the CDS. There's a protocol break, it can get sanitized, reconstructed, re-encrypted, and then sent back out on the trusted side. And so it will mitigate steganography, like watermarks inside images. For audio, there's frequencies outside the human range of hearing. Those will be taken out. So there's just some examples of the type of filtering that's required. So if we want to look at the trusted versus the untrusted networks, you try to build or find an area that you want to secure and assume that other stuff is untrusted, and then you have to look at the cost, right? Am I going to spend $2 million to protect a $100,000 appliance or $100,000 of information? So there's a risk assessment and a cost associated with, what am I trying to protect, and does the cost of protecting it justify protecting? So what I've shown here is in DoD, and I see this box here showing the data coming in and some of it getting rejected, right? It's not like a VPN tunnel that's just going to confidentially deliver malware into your enterprise. It is going to inspect that data, and if it doesn't pass my security rules for inspection, I'm going to drop it. So it's just not going to make it anywhere out. And so to secure yourself, just like I was saying, if you're not gluing the USB ports shut on your computers, and people can just bring their cell phones that we know can be compromised and charging their phone off their laptop or their desktop computer, then you have to assume that if a state actor or one of the larger malware mafias over in Eastern Europe or Russia want to come after your company, they can do it quite easily. So to build a total solution, what you really have to do is you just say, okay, I'm going to assume that the external network is compromised. I'm going to assume that my workers through social engineering or phishing attacks or whatever can be compromised. So I'm going to put different types of those cross-domain appliances between my most valuable assets. And then the defensive cyber operations, the DCO network is a new requirement for DoD that's out there. If I'm rejecting data, the bad guys are in that data that I'm rejecting, and I might want to audit that data. So any of that malware that might get rejected, I'm sending it over to my DCO. So I need to isolate my DCO from the rest of my enterprise. That's done with what's called data diode. We've got data diodes that Owl makes for isolating all the log collection, pushing through the DCO so that if anything bad gets in there, it stays in there. Then we also have other diodes that are for vaults. If I take key backups and things like that, I want to push it into my vault, but I don't need to come back out of that. We isolate a number of customers' data vaults that way as well. And then we've already talked about IoT. IoT, lots of very inexpensive Chinese-made IoT devices out there, light bulbs, thermostats, switches. So those, due to the small software stack that's inside there, the infrequency of those actually getting firmware updates, those are huge attack surfaces out there. It's going to be very hard to scan and patch IoT devices. Once there's an exploit in those, you just have to pretty much isolate the network. So just assume that they're on, assume that the adversaries have already gotten those, sandbox them off. And then what you can do is isolate the data that comes in off of them through a diode so that you know that even if they send something into a segment of the network, it's not going to come back out to them and they can't send it back to China. So these are representatives of our cross-domain technologies. We use HP servers. We're the only NSA certified cross-domain technology that's approved for connecting US classified networks to our foreign partner networks for voice over IP calls. So when the US is coordinating with Ukraine and NATO, our appliances are what connects the US Department of Defense and the intelligence community to those foreign countries. So that we can drop the warheads on foreheads and also make sure if we're working in a joint operation. The Canadians, a lot of the Canadians have beards, and a lot of the people in that region of the world have beards. And so we have our military, we tend to not have the long beards. And so there have been many instances where we've seen people on towers and we say, hey, we think we've got Taliban over here, and it's just the Canadians hanging out on the roof. So, you know, we want to protect our allies as well with that. Full motion video, UAVs are out there. We respect the sovereignty of nations. So we will contact us through the State Department in order to fly a UAV somewhere. We have partners though that don't respect the sovereignty of nations, but they happen to have a sensor somewhere that we want to look. We want to consume their full motion video. You don't necessarily trust their networks. They might be a good partner, but they might have what's called bad cyber hygiene. They don't have all these things in place. They just use Amazon Cloud. They don't have any firewall in place. And so, you know, if they're a smaller country that doesn't have a big budget, they're still a friend, but we don't necessarily trust their network. So we'll isolate not just our friends, but our frenemies, and then our less sophisticated partners. And then B3CDS is our other enterprise offering that connects. These are kind of point solutions that I don't have a picture of them, but we also do like systems of vehicles and boats and things like that, small form factor. And then we have the enterprise, which is your larger data centers connecting dozens of countries together in coalitions so that they can do real-time collaboration. Then we also do have our diodes. Actually, we have an exportable CDS that we use for foreign military sales of fighter jets. So we sell fighter jets to foreign partners in the mission planning environment where they do their mission planning. We secure that. And then we have a CDS that's XD Bridge ST, which actually has a diode inside of it that allows you to connect to even higher risk networks. XD Verge is one of our newer products. It's a protocol filtering diode. So layers 1 through 4 in the OSI model, so the IP and port, things like that. It will basically receive an Ethernet frame on one side, strip off those headers, take the payload, send it to the other side of the FPGA, reconstruct it, and then send it on. And so what that does is that prevents IP stack exploits in operating systems and things like that. It's also for, there's a little bit of discussion of industrial control systems. I might want to monitor a plant. So I've got a water processing plant. The best way to keep it secure is to keep it off the internet. But there's key data that I want to get out of that network for monitoring. So you might send that monitoring data across the diode up to my network operations center and monitor the water treatment plant, but not expose it to me. So that's another piece that we do. And then XD Matrix, you can see all those ports across there. For defensive cyber operations, each one of those ports, you can put one of your appliances into the summer network and feed all of their logs into your DCO, and then that can get that. And then we have our industrial cross-domain appliance. The big customer for that is a Saudi Arabian oil company. They were hacked by Iran. And so our technology now protects their networks from their neighbors. OPDS 1000 is a TCP-based diode. EPDS is another one of our diode technologies, and then I've already talked about ISD. So that's my 20 minutes. So now I'll take any questions.
Are you cloud available? Are you in the cloud data center?
Yes, so we do. We're not virtualized in the cloud. The silicon isn't trusted. So there's we sit at the edge, we secure the edge of the cloud. So we're in Microsoft's Azure cloud. We do secure some other customers' cloud offerings, but not in a virtualized cloud. Cloud can mean a lot of things. Most people, when they say cloud now, it means virtualized and like Amazon's cloud. But there is cloud, which means a computer in somebody else's data center. And for the most part, because of the security and the side channel attacks that have been out on at the silicon level and the exploits, so many exploits have happened at the processor level with virtualization. To get the level of assurance from our products signed off on, for the most part, once you virtualize them, you lose that level of assurance. So yes, we're in the cloud, but no, we're not virtualized. Yeah.
In your presentation, you have shown segmentation of zero trust. How do you address temporal nature of zero trust?
In what way?
Means all the properties of the temporal properties of trust that we typically have.
Seeking time across everything, you mean? Replay attacks, things like that, or?
You're using zero trust. Essentially, there is a time limit to every trust. Right. So how do you address those?
I mean, that is the zero trust appliances. I'm sorry, the TCP. Yeah. So that's part of what our cross-domain technology does as well, is it validates that sessions were properly set up and torn down. If there's a protocol, for instance, SIP, a way of word call gets set up. If I don't see all the steps along the way of that call getting set up, TLS handshake, I'm going to call you, you're going to answer, we're going to negotiate ports, and then we're going to send media. If I don't see that whole transaction life cycle, I'm going to assume that there's a replay attack happening. There's session timers. If I see a session that's active and there's no data going back and forth for a certain time period, I'm going to kill the session. So there's lots of those types of session management controls that are there as well. And I guess that's another key piece of this is as you get down this and you start focusing on those types of attacks, NTP, really good time sync becomes more and more and more important, because if your two sides get too far out of sync from a time standpoint, you can actually have the security trip and then all your services will be cut off. Any more questions? All right, thanks, Michael Blake. Yeah, thank you.